Do you know the sound of a perfect life shattering? It isn't a loud explosion. It's the quiet click of a sent email. Tonight, my husband is being honored for his stellar career at the lavish Astra Tower ballroom. He told me I couldn't come, that it was a high-level internal event. He doesn't know I'm on my way too. And I'm not bringing a gift. I'm bringing the proof that will turn his bonus party into his public execution. My name is Maya. I am 34 years old. By trade, I am a data analyst at Innovate Solutions. Or at least, I was one of their most promising. My mind thrives on finding patterns, on turning chaotic data sets into clean, predictable lines of logic. But I put that on pause. I chose to step back, to shift my projects to a remote-only basis, to make my schedule almost entirely flexible. I did it all for him, for my husband, David. David is 36, and he is the definition of a rising star at Atlas Capital, one of the most prestigious investment firms in Chicago. He possesses a kind of high-wattage magnetism that pulls people into his orbit: clients, bosses, everyone. His ambition is a relentless, roaring engine, and I was, until recently, proud to be the one refueling it. Tonight is his big night, the bonus party. I watched him fasten the platinum cufflinks on his Tom Ford suit, the one that cost more than my first car. The dark charcoal wool fit him perfectly, a custom-made armor for the modern financial warrior. He turned to me, standing in the foyer of our home, his smile so bright it could blind you. He kissed my forehead, a dismissive, quick gesture that barely registered. "Just the executives, honey," he said, his voice smooth as polished glass. "It'll be agonizingly boring. All speeches and stale champagne. I promise I'll be home early and tell you all about it." He adjusted his tie, his eyes already focused on the elevator, already halfway out the door of our life. The lie slid off his tongue so easily, so practiced, that I almost believed it. Now, I am alone. The silence of our penthouse apartment is heavy, almost suffocating. We live on the 45th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook the Chicago River. The city lights glitter below like a carpet of scattered diamonds, a view that cost a fortune, a view that was supposed to mean we had made it. I poured a glass of Cabernet, the deep red liquid swirling in the oversized crystal. I am proud of him. Of course, I am. His success is our success. That's what I have always told myself. But lately, I feel less like a partner and more like a high-end spectator. Invisible. I took a sip of the wine, trying to wash away the familiar, unsettling knot that had taken up residence in my stomach. This feeling of unease, it's nothing, I told myself. Our relationship is perfect. David tells me so all the time, as if summoned by the very thought of our perfect life. My phone buzzed on the cold marble countertop. The caller ID flashed Brenda, David's mother. I let it ring twice before answering, steeling myself for the inevitable inspection. "Maya, dear," her voice crackled through the speaker. Never warm, always probing. She never calls to ask how I am, or how my diminished projects at Innovate Solutions are going. Her calls have one singular purpose: to remind me of my role in David's ascendancy. I do hope you're keeping things calm for David tonight. He needs absolute focus. You are so very lucky. You know, a man like that, destined for greatness. A good wife understands that her job is to sacrifice quietly, to be the wind beneath his wings, not the anchor at his feet. I murmured something non-committal, my knuckles turning white as I gripped the wine glass. Quiet sacrifice. That was her favorite mantra for me. After I hung up, her words seemed to cling to the air, echoing in the cavernous, empty living room. Sacrifice. I walked into our master bedroom, the plush, cream-colored carpet muffling my steps. On my dresser sat an antique, velvet-lined jewelry box. It was empty. It was where David said he was keeping the bracelet, a Miller family heirloom he'd claimed a few weeks ago, an emerald and diamond piece that had supposedly belonged to his great-grandmother. He was having it repaired, he said, getting it polished and the clasp strengthened just for me, a surprise for our upcoming anniversary. His voice had been so sincere, his eyes locked on mine. "It needs to be perfect," he'd whispered, "just like you." I stared at the empty box, at the indentation in the velvet where something heavy used to sit. The silence of the apartment was no longer just quiet, it was deafening. It felt wrong. A creeping dread, cold and sharp, began to crawl up my spine, a sensation I knew from my work. It was the feeling of data that didn't add up, of a pattern emerging where none was supposed to exist. I shook my head, trying to clear the suspicion. This was David, the man I had built my entire world around, the man I had throttled my own ambitions for. I trust my husband. I have to. The alternative was unthinkable. My phone vibrated on the counter, the sharp buzz slicing through the silence. I looked down, expecting another platitude from a well-meaning relative about David's big night. It was a text from Nina, my best friend, my anchor. She's a litigation attorney in the same financial district, a woman who trusts data even less than I do and people far more. The message contained no words, only an image. It was a screenshot of an Instagram story, posted by some junior analyst at Atlas Capital whose feed Nina must have been following. The geotag was clear Astra Tower Ballroom. The caption, written in bubbly celebratory script over the image, read, "Congrats to the future big boss." I squinted, my heart beginning to thud in a slow, heavy rhythm. The photo was a bit blurry, taken from a distance, but the subjects were clear. David. He was beaming, his head thrown back in a laugh, radiating the charm that had won over his bosses and, once upon a time, me. His arm was not around a trophy. It was wrapped tightly, possessively, around a woman's waist. I knew her instantly. Chloe, a recent MBA graduate, barely 28, whom David had taken under his wing as his protégé about a year ago. "She's brilliant. Maya," he had insisted, "a real killer instinct. Reminds me of me." I had hosted her in this very apartment for team dinners, smiled at her, encouraged her. I felt the wine glass slip from my suddenly numb fingers and shatter on the Italian marble floor. The red wine spread like a pool of blood. I didn't look away from the phone. Because that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was not his arm around her waist, or the intimate way her head was tilted toward his. The worst part was on her wrist, gleaming under the ballroom's crystal chandeliers, flashing defiant green and white even in a blurry photo, was the bracelet. The emerald and diamond family heirloom that David was supposedly having repaired for me. It was not on its way to me for our anniversary. It was on the wrist of his protégé. My world didn't just crack. It stopped. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. It wasn't an heirloom. It was a lie. The executive's only party. A lie. The entire foundation of the last several years of my life, my sacrifice, my support, my quiet pride. It was all built on a sickening, elaborate lie. The dizziness was so intense I had to grip the edge of the counter to stay upright. The image on the phone seemed to burn into my retinas. David, Chloe, and my bracelet. The initial shock, the icy hot stab of betrayal, lasted only a few seconds. It was immediately replaced by something else, something I recognized from my work when I've been fed a corrupted data set. It was a cold, clarifying rage. The last 6 months replayed in my mind, but this time the data points were re-indexing, forming a new, horrifying pattern. Those emergency business trips to New York, the ones where he was in meetings until 2 a.m. and couldn't talk, the late-night client dinners that stretched into the early morning, the way his phone, which he used to leave lying around, was now permanently in his pocket or face down on his nightstand, locked. When I'd asked, he'd laughed it off. New company policy. Honey, client data security. You know how it is. I had accepted it all. I had accepted his excuses, his justifications, his smooth, practiced lies, because I trusted him, because he told me our life was perfect. I looked across the room, past the spilled wine, to the dark screen of my work-issued laptop. My real work, the work I had been brilliant at. My job is to find the truth hidden inside the noise. My job is to take seemingly random events, connect them, and expose the pattern that others are trying to hide. My marriage had just become the most chaotic data set of my career, and I was about to analyze the hell out of it. David is smart. I've always known that. His intelligence is sharp, quick, and ruthless. But his arrogance is his critical flaw. It's a flaw I've seen him leverage as charm, but in reality, it's a blind spot. 3 months ago, he'd complained about his work laptop running out of space and linked it to our family cloud storage. Just to back up some presentation files and photos, honey, he'd said. It's easier than dealing with the IT department. He had never unlinked it. He had forgotten. I sat at my desk, the spilled wine on the floor long forgotten, and logged into the cloud. My fingers moved over the keyboard with the steady, precise rhythm of a professional. I was not a wife anymore. I was an analyst. I wasn't looking for sexts or romantic emails. Those were just symptoms. I was looking for the disease. I was looking for the numbers. His work drive was messy, cluttered with forecasts and client portfolios, but I bypassed them. I looked in the synced desktop folder, a place he always used for his active projects. Tucked inside a folder labeled Personal was another, more discreetly named file, Retirement Project. It was encrypted. My heart hammered against my ribs. Retirement Project. The sheer audacity. A password prompt appeared. I typed our anniversary. Access denied. I typed his birthday. Access denied. I typed his mother's birthday. Access denied. A cold, bitter certainty washed over me. I opened a new browser tab and went to Chloe's public Instagram feed, the one Nina had screenshotted. Her bio was obnoxiously public: Leo Sun, MBA, living my best life. I searched for her birthday posts. It took me less than 30 seconds. August 16th. I went back to the password prompt. I typed the numbers, 1 by 1, 0816. The folder opened. My breath hitched. It wasn't full of photos. It was full of spreadsheets, scanned banking slips, wire transfer authorizations, and a subfolder labeled Zoom Archives. I clicked on the master spreadsheet first. My analyst brain took over, the part of me that sees order in chaos. The file was a list of client accounts at Atlas Capital, but they weren't the active, high-growth accounts David bragged about. These were tagged differently. Dormant. Legacy. Inactive probate. My blood ran cold. These were sleeping accounts. Clients who were very old, in long-term care, or already deceased, with estates tied up in legal limbo. No one was watching them on a daily basis. A second spreadsheet. Transfers. Detailed the mechanism. Tiny, systematic withdrawals, just under the $10,000 federal reporting limit. Thousands of dollars siphoned off every week, month after month. The money wasn't going to David. It was being routed through a complex series of international shell companies' names I'd never heard of, based in jurisdictions with lax banking laws. And then I saw the final destination. The money was pooled and finally transferred back to a single, consolidated account, an account held in the name of Chloe Vance. I felt sick. This wasn't just infidelity. This wasn't just skimming. This was a massive, predatory fraud. They were stealing from the dead. I opened the Zoom archives. The files were audio-only recordings. I clicked on one from 2 weeks ago, labeled Final Payout Strategy. David's voice, the same voice that had lied to me about an executives-only party, filled the room. The final transfer is the riskiest, Chloe. It has to look clean. We'll route the Palmer account payout through the performance bonus pool. It's big enough to hide it. I'll be awarded it at the party. It becomes a legitimate, taxed payment, and no one is the wiser. God, you're brilliant! Chloe's voice, breathless and admiring. What about the bracelet? Already handled, David said, his voice laced with the same arrogant charm he used on everyone. A little bonus for you, my dear. I bought it with the first draw from the 881B fund. She thinks it's a family heirloom. The room started to spin. The bonus he was receiving tonight. The record-breaking bonus his mother was so proud of. It wasn't a reward from Atlas Capital. It was the final withdrawal. The grand finale of their theft, laundered in plain sight, washed clean by the applause of his colleagues. The bracelet wasn't just a gift to his mistress. It was a payment, a trophy, bought with stolen money from an account designated 881B. The Palmer account. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was using me, my home, and our life as a cover for a criminal enterprise. And tonight, he was celebrating his victory in public, with his accomplice on his arm, wearing the evidence on her wrist. I almost buckled. The physical weight of the fraud, the sheer icy malice of it, threatened to send me to my knees right there on the marble floor, next to the stain of the wine I had been too trusting to drink. My legs were shaking, a deep, cellular tremor. But the sickness was immediately overtaken by a surge of white-hot adrenaline. My anger, my analyst's need for the complete picture, held me upright. He hadn't just stolen money. He had stolen my life, my trust, my sacrifices. I went back to the cloud. I didn't stop at the retirement project. I went deeper, into his primary email archives, which he had also, stupidly, synced. I didn't need a password for this. Our accounts were linked. I ran a search. I wasn't looking for Chloe. I was looking for Brenda. The results populated instantly. A chain of emails from 2 months ago. The subject line was, Family Matters. My own memory provided the context. 2 months ago. I had been reviewing our joint bank statements, preparing our quarterly tax estimates. I'd seen an unusual wire transfer into our main account, a sum of over $90,000. It was coded as a payroll deposit, but it was separate from his usual salary. I'd asked him about it, naively. Oh, that, he'd said, barely looking up from his phone. It's just an early bonus, honey. We landed the Palmer account. The firm is ecstatic. Don't worry about it. I'd wanted to believe him. I had believed him. Now, I read the email he sent to his mother the very next day. To Brenda Miller. From David Miller. Subject Family Matters B. Had a slight issue. Maya was looking at the statements and asked about the $90K. I told her it was an early bonus from the Palmer deal. It's handled, but just in case she mentions it to you, you need to back me up. Tell her I'm brilliant. Tell her I deserve it, whatever you normally do. Just make sure she stays in her lane. My stomach twisted. Whatever you normally do. This was a script they had rehearsed, but the true, devastating blow had not yet landed. That came with Brenda's reply, sent less than 10 minutes later. It was the reply that would extinguish any last, lingering ember of the life I thought I had. To David Miller, from Brenda Miller. Subject Family Matters. David, stop panicking. I will handle it. As I have always handled it. I've already been talking to her. I've told her repeatedly that she needs to learn to trust your genius and stop asking so many tedious questions. A man like you is destined for big things, and you deserve everything you get. No matter how you get it, you are a Miller. We take what we are owed. This is a wife's job, to support, not to inspect. I'll call her this week and reinforce the message. My only concern is you. Be smarter. Make sure she never has access to the real accounts. She is an analyst, after all. It's foolish to let the help see the books. I'll see you at the party. I am so proud of what you've built. I read the email 3 times. The words, no matter how you get it, and make sure she never has access, burned in my vision. The help. She had called me the help. Brenda wasn't just an oblivious, overbearing mother-in-law. She was a co-conspirator. She knew. She knew about the fraud, about the theft. She wasn't just encouraging his ambition. She was actively helping him conceal his crimes. All those phone calls, All that advice about quiet sacrifice and being the wind beneath his wings. It wasn't marital guidance. It was a calculated psychological campaign. It was damage control. It was a containment strategy designed to manage the problem me. The infidelity was a deep wound. The fraud was a crime. But this was an annihilation. This was a systematic, cold-blooded manipulation by a woman who had let me call her mom at our wedding. The person I had turned to for family advice, who had held my hand when I had a miscarriage 3 years ago, had been actively, gleefully, covering for the man who was betraying me and robbing the vulnerable. The grief was a sharp, physical pain, a dagger twisting in my chest. It was worse than David's betrayal because it was more insidious. He was a greedy, arrogant adulterer. She was pure poison, wrapped in the guise of family. I realized with a terrifying, absolute clarity that I was not just married to a liar. I had been absorbed into a family of predators. I was not a wife. I was a mark. And I was married to a criminal. I stood up from the desk. The shock receded, replaced by a sudden, glacial calm. The tears that had welled in my eyes when I read Brenda's email evaporated, frozen by a surge of pure, undiluted adrenaline. The woman who had been weeping over a broken marriage was gone. The analyst, the strategist, the part of me that sees a problem and requires a solution, had taken control. Tears were useless. Crying was a wasted variable. I needed a plan. My first thought was the obvious one: call the police. Dial 911 and report the felony. But I dismissed the idea as quickly as it came. David was smart, and he was currently at a party, probably with his phone in his pocket. The second he got a notification from a bank, or a call from a panicked colleague, or the slightest whiff of trouble, he would act. That retirement project folder, sitting so vulnerably on our shared cloud, would be deleted. The shell company accounts would be emptied and dissolved in the space of 5 minutes. He and Chloe would be on a red-eye to some country with no extradition treaty before the Chicago police had even finished taking my statement. He would flee, and I would be left in our silent, empty penthouse with nothing but a complex, untraceable financial mess and a shattered life. Confrontation was equally pointless. What would I do? Drive down to the Astra Tower and cause a scene? He would lie. It was his greatest skill. He would twist it, deploy that devastating charm, paint me as the hysterical, jealous wife. He would apologize, weep, promise to fix it, all while buying himself the precious seconds he needed to destroy the evidence. Brenda would be right there, patting his arm, telling everyone I was unstable and stressed. No, he couldn't be allowed to talk. He couldn't be allowed to spin this. I needed to destroy him, not just divorce him, not just expose him. I needed to end him. The destruction had to be total, public, immediate, and irreversible. It had to happen tonight, while he was at the apex of his triumph, surrounded by the very people whose respect he had stolen. I needed to pull the entire foundation of his life out from under him while he was standing on the stage. To do that, I needed an ally. I needed someone in that room who had more power than David, someone whose authority was absolute. I returned to my laptop, my fingers flying across the keys. The spilled wine on the floor had dried into a sticky, dark map of my ruined life. But I ignored it. I opened a fresh browser tab. Google search, Atlas Capital Executive Board. The company's leadership page loaded. The first name was the obvious one, Marcus Harrison, CEO. David spoke of him with a mixture of terror and awe. Marcus was a corporate shark, a man infamous for his ruthless focus on the bottom line. He was hosting the party. He was the king. But as I scanned the list of board members, another name, linked to his, caught my eye: Isabella Harrison. She was listed not just as a board member, but as chairperson of the Ethics and Compliance Committee. I clicked her name. The bio was not that of a simple socialite wife. Isabella Harrison was a major shareholder. She was a direct descendant of the company's founding family. Atlas Capital wasn't just his company, it was her legacy. It was her name. I dug deeper, opening new tabs, searching the financial news archives. The press described her as the iron spine of Atlas, uncompromising, and a fierce guardian of the firm's integrity. One article from 2 years ago detailed how she had personally overseen the firing and prosecution of a senior partner for expense account fraud. The amount had been paltry, less than $50,000. She had pursued him relentlessly. In a quote to the press, she had said, "The Harrison name will not be synonymous with theft at any scale." I stopped clicking. The frantic energy in my chest focused into a single hard point of clarity. My target was not Marcus. It was Isabella. The logic was cold and perfect. A man like Marcus Harrison might even, on some dark level, respect David's raw, predatory ambition. He might just see the affair as a messy but common workplace complication. He might even try to bury the whole thing to protect the firm's reputation and avoid a scandal that could tank the stock. But Isabella, a woman like Isabella Harrison, the chair of ethics, the guardian of the family name, would see this differently. She wouldn't just see a theft, she would see an existential threat. David and Chloe weren't just stealing from dormant accounts, they were stealing from her. They were embarrassing her legacy, and they were doing it at her party, in her city, flaunting the evidence that bracelet right under her nose. A man might forgive an affair. A woman like Isabella will never, ever forgive a theft that makes her company look weak, foolish, and corrupt. I had found my target. I had my weapon. Now, I just had to load the bullet. I shut down the emotional part of my brain. The grief, the betrayal, the memory of Brenda's voice. I packed it all away. The woman standing in the silent penthouse was not a wife. I was an analyst. My job has always been to synthesize complex data into an irrefutable conclusion. This was the most important analysis of my career. My movements became surgical. My hands, which had been trembling, were now rock steady. This was my world, the digital world, and David had made the fatal mistake of letting me in. I worked with a speed that would have impressed my old bosses at Innovate Solutions. I created a new, secure, encrypted zip file. I didn't name it Evidence or David's Crimes. I named it Compliance Audit Q4. It was cold, corporate, and lethal. Into this file, I began dropping the components of his destruction, piece by piece. First, the master spreadsheet of the dormant accounts. I didn't just dump the raw data. I cleaned it, highlighted the key transfers, and added a column showing the dates. The pattern was a clear, escalating theft that accelerated 6 months ago, right when his New York trips started. Second, the money trail. I pulled the scanned wire transfer authorizations in the shell company and corporation documents. I built a simple, devastating flowchart diagramming the money from Atlas Capital to 3 entities in the Cayman Islands, and then the final consolidation into the Nevada account held by Chloe Vance. Third, the Zoom audio. I didn't just take the file, I transcribed the key section, the 30 seconds where David discusses laundering the Palmer account payout through the bonus pool. I put the transcription into a text file, labeling it Audio Transcript Bonus. Fourth, the bracelet, the $80,000 receipt. I traced the transaction ID directly from the 881B Palmer account. He had coded it as a consulting fee. I took a screenshot of the digital receipt from the jeweler and placed it next to the screenshot of the bank transfer. They were a perfect match. Finally, the kill shot. The email chain between David and his mother. The proof of conspiracy and intent. No matter how you get it, make sure the help never sees the books. This was the file that proved it wasn't just greed. It was a deeply rooted familial corruption. I compressed the 5 files. The digital bomb was set. I pulled a black, unlabeled USB thumb drive from my desk drawer, a simple, anonymous piece of plastic. I dragged the Compliance Audit Q4 zip file onto it. The progress bar filled in less than 2 seconds. But I knew I couldn't just hand Isabella Harrison a USB drive in the middle of a gala. She was a CEO, a board member. She wouldn't just plug in a random drive. I needed a cover letter. I needed an executive summary. I opened a new text document. I typed, Confidential Executive Summary Subject, Internal Fraud and Embezzlement Scheme. RE Client Fund, 881B, the Palmer account. I did not use a single emotional word. I wrote it in the sterile language of a compliance officer. Systematic depletion of dormant legacy accounts identified, totaling over $4.5 million. Perpetrators identified as senior partner David Miller and associate Chloe Vance. Funds laundered via unauthorized offshore shell entities. Final fraudulent transfer being disguised tonight as a performance bonus payment to David Miller. Physical evidence an $80,000 bracelet purchased with stolen funds is currently on site, worn by Chloe Vance. Full supporting evidence wire transfers, audio confessions, email proof of concealment is contained on the accompanying drive. I hit print. The all-in-one printer in our home office, which David had bought so he could work from home, word to life. It spat out the single sheet of paper. It was an execution order. I needed the timeline. I went back to Google. Atlas Capital Astra Tower Gala Program. An event planner's website had the public schedule. 8:30 p.m. cocktails, 9:30 p.m. dinner, 10 o'clock p.m. CEO remarks, awards presentation, and new partner announcement. I looked at the digital clock on my laptop. It was 9:15 p.m. He was scheduled to walk on that stage in 45 minutes. He was going to accept his bonus, shake Marcus Harrison's hand, and become untouchable. I had 45 minutes to cross the city, breach security, and hand-deliver the weapon to Isabella Harrison. I grabbed the printed summary and the USB drive and ran for the door. I didn't go to my closet. I went to David's. I ignored the row of silk cocktail dresses he'd bought me, the ones meant for a supportive, smiling wife. Instead, I opened the section where I kept my old self, my analyst self. I pulled out a sharp, charcoal gray business suit. The tailoring was severe, the fabric a heavy, no-nonsense wool. I put on a simple black silk shell underneath and stepped into low, black, pointed-toe heels. I looked in the mirror. I did not see a woman betrayed. I saw a forensic analyst. I saw a lawyer. I was not a scorned wife arriving to make a scene. I was a professional arriving to deliver a finding. I grabbed my keys and the single-page summary, the USB drive warm in my clenched fist. The elevator ride down the 45 floors was a descent into a new reality. I stepped out into the lobby, walked past the doorman who still thought I was Mrs. Miller, and pushed through the revolving doors into the damp Chicago night. It had started to rain, a cold, miserable drizzle that made the city's neon lights bleed into the wet pavement. I got into my car, the engine turning over with a quiet, expensive hum. I pulled out into the sparse downtown traffic, heading for the Astra Tower, just a few miles away. The windshield wipers kept a steady, hypnotic rhythm, like a metronome counting down the last minutes of my old life. The blurred lights of the city streaked past. I remembered the first lie I ever caught him in. Years ago, when we were just dating, he had told me he was debt-free, a savvy saver. I found out by accident he had over $30,000 in outstanding college loans. He had cried when I confronted him. He said he was so ashamed that he just wanted me to see him as successful, as worthy of me. I had held him, and I had forgiven him. I had paid off half of it with my own savings. I turned left onto Wacker Drive, the river to my right, dark and churning. I remembered, just a year ago, when my boss at Innovate Solutions had called me into his office, he offered me a promotion, a team leader position. It was a new data security division, a project I had designed myself. It meant more hours, more responsibility, and a significant pay raise. I had told him I needed to think about it. That night, I told David. He had been so excited about his own potential partnership track at Atlas. He'd put his arms around me, his voice a warm, convincing murmur. "That's amazing, honey. You deserve it. But, are you sure? With my hours about to get so much crazier, we need one of us to be available, to be the rock. We need that balance. I had turned down the promotion the next day. I had sacrificed it so he could shine, so I could be his rock. The man I had forgiven, the man I had sacrificed for, didn't exist. That warmth I'd mistaken for love was just a tool. It was a high-level manipulation, a strategic deployment of charm to get what he wanted: my money, my support, my silence. The grief was gone. The sadness had evaporated. All that remained was a cold, hard clarity, as sharp and clean as a shard of glass. He was not a flawed man. He was a predator. As I pulled up to the final stoplight before the tower, its gleaming 100-story facade disappearing into the low-hanging clouds, my phone rang. The screen illuminated the face I had been staring at in my mind. Brenda. A jolt of icy fear shot through me. She was calling me now. My hand shook as I pressed the speakerphone button. Maya, dear, her voice, sharp and laced with a false, strained sweetness. Are you there? Thank goodness. I'm here, Brenda. Is everything okay? Oh, it's a wonderful party. Just wonderful, she gushed. But David, you know how he gets. He's so nervous before a big speech. He's just realized he left his speech notes at home, on the desk in his study. Can you be an absolute angel and bring them to the Astra Tower for him? He's in a complete panic. The lie was so sudden, so specific. My mind almost stalled. Speech notes. And then, I understood. Brenda was at the party. She was right there, with David and Chloe. This wasn't a request. This was a reconnaissance mission. This was a check-in call. She was calling to make sure I was still where I was supposed to be, at home, in the penthouse, drinking my wine and quietly sacrificing. She was calling to ensure the coast was clear, that the help was still safely tucked away in the kitchen. The audacity of it, the sheer, brazen contempt, was breathtaking. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. It was the first time I had smiled all night. I let my voice become as sweet and accommodating as she had always trained me to be. Oh, of course, I said, my voice dripping with concern. Poor David, he must be so stressed. Don't you worry. Mom, I'll find them. I'm on my way right now. I hung up before she could say another word, and I floored the accelerator, running the red light. I left the car with the valet, not caring that I was cutting off a line of limousines. I didn't wait for the ticket. I walked into the main lobby of the Astra Tower, my heels clicking with a sharp, echoing rhythm on the polished marble. The scale of the place was designed to intimidate, to make you feel small. The ceilings soared hundreds of feet, and a massive, modern crystal sculpture hung in the air like a frozen explosion. The low, powerful thrum of the party, the collective sound of Chicago's most powerful voices, was drifting down from the grand escalators. I rode the escalator up, my charcoal suit feeling like armor. I held the single sheet of paper in one hand, the USB drive digging into the palm of my other. The air at the top was thick with the smell of expensive perfume and cooked lobster. The ballroom entrance was a massive, glowing archway, flanked by 2 security guards who were built like refrigerators, speaking quietly into their wrists. I approached the left one, the man who seemed to be in charge of the guest list tablet. He looked up, his eyes scanning me once, and dismissed me instantly. My business suit was not a party dress. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, his voice a polite, impenetrable wall. "This is a private, ticketed event. Your name is not on the list." He didn't ask me. He told me. "I know," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I'm not a guest. I am here to deliver an urgent, time-sensitive document directly to Mrs. Isabella Harrison." He didn't blink. He must have heard this 1,000 times. "Mrs. Harrison is hosting the event and is unavailable. You can leave the document with me, and I will ensure it gets to her personal staff." "No," I said. I stepped closer, forcing him to focus on me. "That is not an option. This is a private, internal legal document. It cannot be given to a third party, and it is time-sensitive to the minute." He began to shake his head, the polite refusal already forming on his lips. "Ma'am, I cannot let you—" This was it. "It concerns Client Fund 881B, I said, cutting him off. The words, spoken clearly and without emotion, hung in the air between us. The guard froze. His entire demeanor, the polite, go-away mask, vanished. His body physically stiffened. His hand, which had been gesturing for me to leave, dropped to his side. He stared at me, his eyes narrowed. He had no idea what Client Fund 881B was, but he knew, with absolute gut-level certainty, that it was not a random phrase. It was an internal code, a compliance trigger. It was a key I should not have had. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a low, serious growl. "Say that again." "Client Fund 881B, I repeated, holding his gaze. "I need to speak to Mrs. Harrison or her direct representative now. It is an active compliance matter." He didn't say another word to me. He turned his head, his hand pressing the earpiece. His voice was a low, urgent murmur, no longer meant for me. "Dispatch, I have a code situation at the ballroom main entrance. A non-guest, female, dark suit, claims to have urgent legal information for Mrs. Harrison. The information pertains to, I quote, Fund 881B. Yes? 881B? I need guidance. I'll hold." He stood there, a stone wall between me and the party. Behind him, through the archway. I could hear the sound of applause. My stomach clenched. How much time did I have? The wait was agonizing, stretching for what felt like an hour but was probably only 20 seconds. The guard's eyes kept darting between me and the crowd. Then, the archway parted. A woman, not a guard, burst through. She was in her late 40s, wearing a severe black dress and a headset that made her look like she was running a military operation. Her eyes were sharp, scanning, and landed on me instantly. I recognized her from my research, Isabella's chief of staff. She ignored the guard and strode directly to me, her tablet clutched in one hand. "You're the one," she snapped, her voice all business. "You have the 881B information." I didn't answer. I simply held up the single sheet of paper, the executive summary. Her eyes flickered down, scanning the title, Internal Fraud and Embezzlement Scheme. Her face, already pale with stress, lost another shade of color. She looked from the paper, to my face, and back to the paper. She made her decision. "Follow me," she commanded, "and do not speak to anyone." She turned on her heel and walked, expecting me to keep up. I stepped past the stunned guard and followed her through the velvet rope. Into the heart of the party, the assistant, Amanda, did not lead me back into the roaring chaos of the ballroom. She moved with a controlled, frantic energy, guiding me down a short, thickly carpeted hallway I hadn't noticed before, away from the music. She pushed open a heavy, unmarked door, and we were suddenly in a quiet, narrow service corridor. We took a private elevator, and she used a key card to access the floor above. She led me through a set of glass doors onto a private open-air balcony. It was a small stone terrace built for executives, overlooking the main ballroom, one floor up. The noise from the party below was a muffled, distant sea of sound. The cold, damp Chicago air hit me, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat of the party. A woman was standing there, her back to us, gripping the stone railing. She wore a floor-length navy blue silk gown, cut with a severity that matched her posture. Even from behind, she radiated an aura of absolute, unassailable power. "Ma'am," the assistant said, her voice trembling slightly. "This is the woman." Isabella Harrison turned. Her face was as I remembered from the articles, elegant, aristocratic, with intelligent eyes that were, at this moment, cold with irritation. She looked at my charcoal suit with a flicker of confusion, then at me. She was not panicked, She was annoyed. "You have 5 seconds," she said. Her voice was a low, polished alto, the kind of voice used to giving orders that were never questioned. "And if this is some kind of vendor dispute, I will have my assistant call security." My heart was hammering so hard I was afraid she could see it through my suit jacket. But I did not speak. Words were David's weapon. They were for liars. My weapon was data. I simply held out the single sheet of paper, the executive summary. She stared at it, then at me, her impatience growing. She clearly expected me to beg, to explain, to stammer. I just held the paper steady, my hand rock solid. With a sharp, annoyed sigh, she snatched the page from my hand. I watched her face. It was the only data that mattered now. She glanced at the header, her eyes scanning. I saw them stop. Subject: internal fraud and embezzlement scheme. Her expression tightened. Client fund, 881B. The Palmer account. The shift was instantaneous. The bored, aristocratic annoyance vanished, as if a mask had dropped. It was replaced by a terrifying, high-voltage focus. Her eyes, which had dismissed me, were now lasers, burning into the text. She read the bullet points, her head perfectly still. I saw her eyes absorb the figures, $4.5 million. David Miller and Chloe Vance, laundered via offshore entities. Her knuckles, gripping the paper, turned white. She read the entire page in a few seconds. She lifted her head, and the gaze she fixed on me was entirely different. The woman was gone. The chairperson of the ethics committee was here. "Proof," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a command. I held out my other hand, the one I had kept clenched at my side. I uncurled my fingers to reveal the small, black, anonymous USB drive. She looked at the drive. She looked at me. This was the moment. The pivot point of the entire night. This was the moment I had gambled everything on. She was the guardian of the Harrison name. She could take that drive, walk back inside, and drop it into an incinerator. She could have me dragged out by the guards who had tried to stop me, paint me as a hysterical, delusional wife. She could bury this, and David would be safe. Her company's reputation versus my truth. She stared at me, her mind clearly calculating the cost of a scandal versus the cost of an internal rot. I didn't let her finish the equation. I turned and stepped to the railing, leaning over slightly. From here, we had a bird's-eye view of the entire ballroom. The stage was directly below us, and in the front, at the table of honor, I saw him, David. He was glowing, laughing, holding a champagne flute, accepting congratulations from Marcus Harrison himself. And standing next to him, her hand possessively on his arm, was Chloe. "You don't need the drive to verify the first piece of evidence," I said. My voice was cold and clear, cutting through the night air. Isabella moved to the railing beside me, her navy blue dress rustling. Her eyes followed mine. "His accomplice," I said, and I pointed. "Chloe Vance, the woman in the green dress, standing next to my husband. She is currently wearing the $80,000 emerald bracelet, the one purchased using stolen funds from the 881B Palmer account. The digital receipt from the jeweler, matched to the bank transfer from the stolen fund, is in Section 4 of the USB drive you are about to take." Isabella squinted. Her focus narrowed, zooming in on the woman next to David. She saw the emerald green dress, and the even brighter, more vulgar flash of green and white fire on Chloe's wrist. She saw the audacity. To steal the money, to wear the theft, to this party, in her ballroom, right in front of her. It was not just a crime, it was an insult. The calculation was over, the decision was made. Isabella Harrison's face became a mask of cold, righteous fury. She knew I was telling the absolute truth. She did not say, "Thank you." She did not ask me who I was. She did not offer a single word of sympathy. She simply held out her hand. I placed the USB drive into her open palm. Her fingers closed over it like a trap. She turned away from me, clutching the drive and the single sheet of paper. She gave her assistant, who had been watching the entire exchange with wide, terrified eyes, a sharp, violent nod toward the door. Then she turned her back on me and walked, with purpose, back toward the elevator, back toward the ballroom, leaving me alone in the cold. I did not leave the balcony. I stepped back from the railing, partially concealed by a stone pillar, and I watched. I was the analyst, observing the final catastrophic failure of a corrupted system. Down below, the ballroom was bathed in a warm, golden light. The clinking of glasses and the low hum of self-congratulation had quieted down as Marcus Harrison stepped onto the stage, his face beaming. He was a lion, king of his domain, completely unaware of the cobra that had just been set loose in his den. "Thank you, he boomed, his voice full of manufactured warmth. "What a night at Atlas. We reward results. We reward innovation. We reward the kind of killer instinct that puts our firm and our clients first." He paused for dramatic effect. "And tonight, the award for New Partner of the Year, along with a record-breaking bonus, goes to the man who has single-handedly reshaped the future of our legacy funds." David Miller. A wave of thunderous applause erupted. A brilliant, harsh white spotlight jumped from the stage and began scanning the front tables, searching for its star. I saw David. I saw him push back his chair, the picture of practiced humility. He put a hand on Chloe's back, whispering something to her. Already a king claiming his queen. He was about to stand, but he never got the chance. A second figure moved onto the stage. It was Isabella. She had not come from the side stairs. She had walked up the main steps from the ballroom floor, moving with a speed and a fury that was terrifying. She did not wait. She walked directly to her husband and took the heavy gold microphone from his stunned hand. The applause died, not all at once, but in a ragged, confused wave. The spotlight wavered, unsure, caught between Marcus's shocked face and Isabella's cold one. The silence that fell was absolute. It was a vacuum, heavy and total. "There has been a change in the program." Isabella's voice, amplified by the sound system, was not a shout. It was a blade. It sliced through every person in that room, cold and sharp. Down at the table, David had frozen, halfway out of his chair. His smile was still plastered on his face, but it was a grotesque, paralyzed thing. He was staring at Isabella, his head tilted, not yet understanding. Isabella did not look at her husband. She did not look at the crowd. Her eyes found David, and she aimed the microphone at him like a weapon. "Security," she said, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Please escort Mr. David Miller and Ms. Chloe Vance from the building." A single horrified sound, a small shriek, came from Chloe. She grabbed David's arm. David finally stood, his hands raised slightly, the smile now a confused, pleading grimace. "But, Isabella, Mr. Harrison, I don't understand," he stammered. "Mr. Harrison," Isabella said, finally turning to her husband, who was standing, dumbfounded, 2 feet away. "Call our lawyers. Tell them to meet you at the office, and then call the Chicago police. We have just uncovered a significant multi-million-dollar internal theft." The word police hung in the air, an explosion in the silence, and in that precise, perfect, catastrophic moment, David's head snapped up. His eyes, frantic and searching, scanned the room for an answer, for an escape. They moved past the crowd, past the stage, and up to the balcony. He saw me. I was standing in the open now, my charcoal suit a void in the golden light. I was not hiding. I was just watching. The color, the confidence, the high-wattage charm, it all drained from his face at once. It was like watching a building be demolished. The blood left his face, leaving behind a sick, pale, waxen mask. The arrogant smile, the quick wit, The entire persona that was David Miller simply evaporated. In its place was a hollow, terrified, empty thing. He understood. In one shattering, soul-destroying second, he understood everything. A new sound erupted, this one from the side. Brenda. She was on her feet at her table, her face a mask of purple rage. She, too, had followed his gaze. She saw him looking at me. She saw me looking at him. Maya, she screamed, her voice a raw, desperate howl that ripped through the stunned room. Maya, what did you do, you bitch, what did you do? Two large security guards, the same men who had tried to block me, were now moving through the tables, their faces grim. They grabbed David by his upper arms. A second pair of guards moved toward Chloe, who had begun to sob as they clamped down on his Tom Ford suit. David couldn't look away from me. He was being dragged backward, past the tables of his stunned colleagues, past his shrieking mother. He never took his eyes off me. The confusion was gone. The terror was gone. All that was left was a raw, primal, and utterly impotent hatred. His face was a promise of what he would do to me if he could. I did not smile. I did not wave. I did not cry. I just watched. I watched the man I had given my life to. I watched the man who had called me his rock. I watched him be dragged out of his own bonus party like a common criminal, his heirloom bracelet flashing on the wrist of the weeping woman being dragged out beside him. I stayed for 1 second more, listening to the chaos, to the shouts, to the beginning of the end of Atlas Capital's perfect evening. Then, I turned my back on the fire. I turned my back on the wreckage of his career and the ashes of my marriage. I walked to the private elevator, my heels clicking, and pressed the button to go down. The party was over. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know where you are listening from in the comments below. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it extra support by hitting the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.